On today's episode of Locked On Raptors, what should the Raptors rotation look like once OG Anunoby returns to the lineup, both for the rest of the regular season and going into the postseason? We'll talk about the starters. We'll talk about the most trusted bench guys. We'll talk about the deep rotation pieces and all that and more. On today's episode of the podcast with Jamar Hinds from Raptors Republic. That's all coming up.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1139 of Locked On Raptors for Wednesday, March the 16th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the show at Locked On Raptors. And as always, you can find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, all your favorite podcast apps. You can follow, subscribe, rate, review, whatever it is your app of choice asks you to do to support the shows you like. Plus, you can go to YouTube and hit the big red subscribe button and help us out over there with all the 1,700 wonderful people who have already done so. Please go join them. They're lonely. They're looking for more company. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. You can check out prizepicks.com, use the promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. More on them a little bit later on. And as always, a big thank you for making us your first listen of the day. All right. On today's show, OG Anunoby is potentially nearing a return. It's around the 2-week window that he was supposed to be returning within. Still no word as to whether he'll be available tonight. He practiced, however, on Tuesday. And with that is going to bring some questions when it comes to the Raptors rotation. Who's playing? Who's not? Who's starting? Who's coming off the bench? And joining me today to sort through all the mess of the Raptors rotation with the return of OG potentially nigh is the wonderful Jamar Hinds from Raptors Republic from TSN. Jamar, how's it going, man? Welcome back.
I'm pretty good, Sean. How are you?
Doing great, man. Really happy to have you back on the show. I'm not going to lie. As we're recording this show, you're a Jays guy too. Matt Chapman news is flying around. There's a chance I'll be slightly distracted if that comes through. That's fine.
That's news to me. That's news to me. I didn't even know that.
I'm glad to have broken it to you. Matt Chapman, it seems like he's coming to the Blue Jays. Not sure what the return is just yet, but boy, oh boy, they're going to be awesome. Anyway, the Toronto Raptors playing pretty awesome right now too. Let's dig in, Jamar, to the rotation. Let's begin with the starters, shall we? This has kind of been one of the big questions all season long. Who should start when they're at full health? Are people okay with the small ball lineup? Do people want a traditional center in there? Does it matter, considering the traditional centers are all the same size as their nominal center in that small ball starting five in Scottie Barnes? So Jamar, let's just kind of put it out there. OG Anunoby comes back. Let's just assume he's available for Friday's game against the Lakers. Maybe that's pie in the sky, but for the purposes of this conversation, let's just say that's what's going to happen. What do you do when it comes to the starting five once OG returns? Is it like a set five for you? Do you swap in based on matchups? And if you are swapping guys in, who do you think is getting into that starting five in place of who in the starting five that we kind of came to know and love during the middle of the season?
Well, this is a question I've had the entire season, but it's never really been answered because guys have been in and out, whether it be Fred or OG or, Pascal didn't start the season. Yeah. So we've never really got the answer to that question. I think that to start, they're just going to go with the five we know, with Pascal, Gary, Scottie, OG, and shoot, I think I messed that up. Fred, Gary,
you got Fred, yeah.
OG.
You throw Fred in there, you're good.
Yeah, Scottie and Pascal, just the normal five that we're used to. But when we go against a team with like a legitimate center, like say we like play Philly or somebody, that time would go bigger and start probably Precious, I would say, at the center spot, and then that's when we're gonna have to figure out who comes off the bench. And then that's when that question's gonna come up. I mean, obviously, it's not gonna be Fred, it's not gonna be Pascal, so you can scratch those two off.
Yeah.
Between it's probably it would. I don't think it would be OG either. So
no.
It It would have to be Gary or Scottie, to be honest. And I mean, I guess it would depend on whether you want the floor spacing that Gary gives you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be a more natural thing to leave Gary in the starting lineup. And I mean, Scottie would still play starters minutes anyway. He could still be over like 30 minutes a game or whatnot. And he could kind of run the second unit and play the backup point minutes sometimes as well
Yeah.
as front court minutes. Like he can kind of do both. I think that's probably the most natural way to do this because obviously I don't think a Fred, Scotty, OG. I just feel like the spacing wouldn't be as good.
Yeah.
So, but you could jump back and forth on this. There's no definitive answer,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what I would narrow it down to. If they have to play a bigger team, but there luckily for them, there's not a lot of teams in the NBA where it's like, okay, we got to match up size wise, right?
Yeah.
Like Denver, Philly. There might be a couple others that I can't remember off the top of my head, but everybody else, you can be okay with getting away with having I guess it would be Pascal lined up at the center spot per se.
Yeah.
But I think the decision would come down between OG and I mean not OG, Scotty and Gary, and I think Scotty would be the more natural fit.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the difficulty I've had all season with this conversation is that when you put it down to it, it's like, oh, well, yeah, they should start a center. That sounds nice. But taking out one of Gary or Scotty is like you're taking one of your 5 best players off the floor artificially for the first 6 minutes of each half. And I just don't love that. I want those guys to play as much as they can. And it's just easier to do that when they start. And then when you get it down to the decision of, all right, is it Scotty or is it Gary? I kind of think Gary has always been a non-starter as the guy to move to the bench. Like it just doesn't work for me because he drives the offensive performance of this team more than anybody except for Pascal Siakam. Just looking at the on-off numbers right now, Siakam, when he's on the floor, the Raptors have 113.9 offensive rating. That's the best among all regulars, only behind Justin Champagnie on the team. Second is Gary Trent Jr., 113.5, and then it kind of drops off after that. And the rest of the regulars are like 111 or below in terms of on-court offensive ratings. So you need Gary out there, even when he's cold, even when he's going through a shooting spell. Like he just offers spacing that creates the driving channels and all this stuff that this team really, really kind of thrives on. And it gets pretty tricky to take him out. And then, yeah, Scotty, I mean, how are you going to take Scotty out of the starting lineup? He's like, he's incredible. Right. He's like, and for me, I guess I've always kind of been a little bit confused as to why we're treating Scotty sort of as like this frail little skinny boy compared to the burly centers you can bring in for the big center matchups and like Joel Embiid. And it's like, oh, Precious and Khem can handle that. Like Scotty's as big as those guys. Like he might be stronger than those guys, but maybe you just roll with Scotty as your 5. And if you get into a situation where you are playing a specific matchup like Joel Embiid in the playoffs, I mean, do you just kind of do the thing where you quickly send doubles all the time and hope that Matisse Thybulle and Tobias Harris are going to miss threes because they have a history of doing so? Yeah. And I wonder if maybe sort of tailoring your entire game plan around the potential of playing the Sixers is maybe not the best way to go about it. And instead just get your 5 best guys out there and roll with them. Is there something to the idea of just sticking with the small ball lineup even against really tough opponents like Embiid?
Well, here's my thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, for most teams, this wouldn't be a problem, but we're just going to go with the Philly hypothetical. The problem is a guy like Embiid, he draws so many fouls. I don't think I'm comfortable starting someone of my best starting 5 like right away having to cover Embiid. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you could. I like your idea of throwing doubles and stuff off the catch and see if there are other guys like Tobias Harris who's having a down year shooting from 3 and Matisse, guys like that, see if they can make an open shot. I do like that idea, but I'm sure you've seen how many foul shots him and Harden have been getting some of these games.
Yeah.
So it's a really tough ask, and like your worst case scenario would be something like, okay, you start your normal five and one of Scottie or Pascal has like 2 fouls in 3 minutes. Then I feel like it's better off you buy 5 to 6 minutes off the top of the game, and if Precious or sometimes Nurse like starting Khem Birch, but one of the two. If they can buy some of those minutes, and they're going to probably pick up a foul or two. I'm a lot more comfortable with that. It should. I like this. I like the staggering more for dealing with a guy like that, because he's going to get calls. He just is.
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if he did it. So that would be my take on that.
That's a really good point. One that now has me reconsidering everything. The damn fouls, man. I think the moral of this conversation is let's just hope they don't play Philly. It's kind of the
basically
main thing here.
Yeah.
It seems like a nightmare.
The only other team I feel like they can get away with that lineup against everybody else. Maybe Milwaukee would cause problems if Brook Lopez is back and fine and well, but he's more of a guy that strays to the perimeter anyway. So even him, I feel like that Milwaukee, I feel like the Raptors could get away with their starting five. It's only the Philly question really to me, and then obviously you test it out, and every team. It's a beautiful thing about the Eastern Conference. This season is like every team has a flaw somewhere, so you could try it out, and if it doesn't work, then make adjustments where you need to. But Philly's the only one that would make me raise an eyebrow. So I don't know if that's how long you could do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, small ball unless Philly comes around, and then oh my God, pray and be very scared. We're gonna continue on here, Jamar, and we're gonna dig into the guys who would help them make set adjustments coming off the bench to fill in either as spot starters in the big man position or just filling in with regular minutes off the bench. I feel like we're gonna know who a few of these guys are, but maybe a couple guys will surprise us. That's coming up in just 1 second here. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks, who have made daily fantasy easy at long last. It is a wonderful little app. You get to pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you against the projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. There's no shadow, expert behind some computer putting together an unbeatable lineup. It's just the projections that Prize Picks puts out that you are up against. It's kind of the way it should be. It's safe and offers fast withdrawals as well. And you can pick any prop you can think of: points scored, rebounds, even steals, and you can do mixed sport entries. So maybe, let's just say it's the middle of April, for example, or maybe April 8th or something like that, and you want to do a mixed sport entry. The Toronto Raptors are playing a game and the Toronto Blue Jays are playing a game. You feel like, oh, maybe I should go and do a prop on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. home runs and points scored by Pascal Siakam. You can do that with Prize Picks. That is a wonderful, beautiful thing. And Prize Picks doesn't, like I said, doesn't just offer the NBA. They have all the different sports that you can mix and match with for your gambling pleasure. For a limited time, Prize Picks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 that is for free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point, but you must use the code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available only to Locked On fans. Sign up today. Use the code NBA for $50 for free if a player in your Prize Picks entry, your first Prize Picks entry, scores a single point. That's free money, baby. Go and sign up over at Prize Picks. Is daily fantasy made easy. We continue on here with Jamar Hinds from Raptors Republic, talking Raptors rotation once they reach full health. And we should dig in here to the bench guys, Jamar. The Raptors have played, lots of different looks so far this season. There was a stretch where they were playing like 7 guys. There's a stretch now where they're playing a little bit deeper of rotation. It's still weird. It's still sort of mismatched and disjointed because everybody's power forwards, and that's just the way we live now. But they're making it work, and they've had some really good success with it at times as well. We should probably also, for the purposes of this, say Malachi Flynn is available. We'll sort of put this down in the future a little bit. I hope that he's available by the playoffs. It's a month away. If he's not, that sucks because what he was doing before he got hurt was really valuable to this team. So we'll assume Malachi Flynn is available for the purposes of this conversation, even if he's not around right now. So Jamar, what do you think in terms of like let's go with like the first 4 guys that Nick Nurse should be trusting off the bench? Lots of different options here. He's gone a lot of different ways. Who would you go with as your sort of trusted 4 within the Nick Nurse circle of trust, a la, times where Patrick McCaw was a big part of that? He kind of has these little groups of guys that he'll kind of get attached to. If you're hoping for names to be involved in that group of trusted guys, who are you looking at right now?
Well, knowing Nick Nurse, I don't think it's going to get to 4 guys off the bench, because there's been times where he's ran 7, like just 7 guys total.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, if we're taking the normal 5 out of the equation, I think those are guys are the starters. It's pretty obvious that Precious would get minutes off the bench. It's pretty obvious that that he's gonna trust Thad Young. So you could scratch those 2 off. Like, those guys are going to be in the rotation.
Yeah.
I guess depending on whether he wants length or whether he wants shooting, I'm pretty sure he would give Malachi the nod over Delano Banton.
Yeah.
And then the 4th guy that I don't think we're going to get to is where things get interesting. Like, he could go with one of those bigger lineups that we've seen him run. Oh, right. Actually, you know what? Never mind. I just thought of it. I was juggling between Birch and somebody, and then I just realized I totally forgot about Chris Boucher.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think those would be the 4 guys off the bench. And I was thinking of him going to like one of those bigger lineups that we've seen sometimes to open like a second quarter or a fourth quarter, like the lineup we saw that beat Denver. And I think they had Birch and Boucher and Thad all on at the same time.
Yeah.
So I could see him doing that type of thing, depending on what look Nurse wanted to give. So I could see Birch getting minutes that way. Like, he wouldn't be totally out of the rotation. He could get spot minutes. But I think Flynn, Thad, Boucher, and Precious would probably be the 4. Like, I'm pretty sure we get minutes.
Yeah, those are the 4 I had down too as like my first 4 off the bench in an ideal situation. It's tricky because, look, Thad Young has not been great so far with the Raptors. The fit has been a little bit clunky, and he's had some interesting, let's say, moments with the ball in his hands, and I think that's been sort of offset by some really great flourishes as well, and you can kind of see the connectivity he brings to the floor. So I don't begrudge anyone who thinks that Thad maybe shouldn't be part of that trusted 4 just yet, and maybe it's get Khem in there or something like that instead. I think for me with Khem, I'm glad to see he's played better lately for sure. It's been nice, and I'm glad to hear that he was so happy to like continue to have the trust of the team. He was talking after the game on Friday against the Suns before summarily getting moved to the bench for the next 2 games. But like, he really I'm glad that he's playing well. I don't know if his skill set really meshes as well as some of these other guys, and I'm not sure I really want him as part of that first 4 off the bench. That said, like, I think as much as Nurse has been really stingy in the past and has, pared things down to a pretty tight rotation when things really get important, I do wonder if the way this team is built and the way that they kind of do things. Have you ever played Tetris, Jamar? You Tetris guy? Okay,
yeah,
so how sometimes when you're playing Tetris, you feel like you have it all set up nicely, but then you screw up and like drop something at a weird angle, and then you have to like take a few extra seconds and a few extra pieces to kind of fill in around it and then get your lines sorted out. That kind of feels to me almost like what this Raptors team is like, where it's like you can't get to all of these specific lineups that they like without going a little bit deeper than 9 in the bench, right? You have to kind of bring in other guys. Banton is going to sort of drop in to those big, funky, weirdo lineups and maybe not have that much of a role elsewhere, but he'll pop in for, 5 to 10 minutes in those weird cookie lineups and sort of transitional minutes. And yeah, Khem might slot in because you need a traditional big. Like, it feels like a team, because of the way it's constructed and the different sort of machinations of all the lineups, that maybe needs more than 9 guys at Nurse's disposal to really kind of get all the looks that they like in over the course of a game. But that said, I still think Thad, Boucher, Precious, Flynn are kind of the main guys for me. And if you're going to take one of those guys out, I mean, I guess it depends on how guys are playing. If Boucher's having a particularly rough stretch or something like that, which we haven't seen much of, so maybe that's not to be expected. But, I feel like maybe Thad's the first guy to take out of that group. But I don't know. How have you liked the Thad fit, Jamar? Like, I still keep wanting to just see him play with the better Raptors players. Like, I want to see a starting, not a starting 5, but like a 5-man look where maybe he slots in place of Barnes as a small ball 5, just to kind of connect all the very good scoring players they have. Where are you at with the way Thad's worked in, and how do you think what do you think his best role or utility is for this team down the stretch?
I think the role he has now is, I don't think it's going to get any bigger or smaller.
Right.
I think this is kind of the role he has. A guy that can be versatile defensively, come off the bench. He can do some short roll stuff. He's gonna shoot one ugly floater a game. I've gotten used to that, but I think he's been okay. And when you have a guy like OG back, it doesn't really make that much sense to play Thad more.
Right.
Because they play the same position pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's going to get his typical 15 to maybe at the high end 20 minutes a game and kind of do what he's doing right now. I don't think that's going to change. And I don't think he's going to be out of the rotation either, because I think him being like the most experienced player on the team, I think Nurse is going to trust him off the bench unless he's playing horrible. It's funny though, where I was thinking about the one big flaw we have with guys coming off the bench is that we don't have a legitimate shooter that can just come off the bench and knock down some threes. We were hoping Mihailuk would be that guy, but I think that he's gotten enough rope where that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't seem
unless Nurse wants to give a spot look somewhere. Don't you find it crazy that of all the guys to come off the bench to be a reliable floor spacer, it's crazy how that's been Precious? Coming into the season, even the first few months of the season, I don't even think he was shooting 20% from 3. No. But since the last 6 weeks, he's basically been a 50% 3-point shooter. And it's not just corner threes, because I think that's where he started. Now he's shooting them above the break. He's shooting them from everywhere. The confidence is there. I find it amazing.
Yeah, he's incredible. It's been the best roller coaster for a player development track that I can recall in quite a while. It's a roller coaster each and every game, possession to possession. But the incremental growth and the sort of weaning off of stupid plays in lieu of smart and effective winning basketball has kind of been one of the stories of the season for Precious. It's been one of the stories of the team, honestly, is kind of him moving into this sort of higher leverage role on the team. I think of all of the guys we've talked about here, he's the most clear ironclad. He's not losing his spot to me.
100%.
Him and Boucher are probably pretty close, but Boucher seems to maybe be in a bit of a competition with Thad, just positionally speaking. Whereas Precious is very clearly one of the most effective 5s on the team, and kind of does a lot of things now. I made this point on yesterday's podcast. He's kind of doing things that you want from a low usage big, in addition to some of the sort of on ball stuff that he's been pretty eager to try out. He's actually offering support and connectivity now to better players, which is a really difficult thing for a guy to kind of step into. So the shooting thing is obviously going to be a problem. And that's why I kind of think maybe that they won't limit it to an 8 or 9 guy rotation, ultimately. And maybe they do sort of pull on a Utah or something like that in a pinch. But I guess, if Flynn can kind of come back, do what he was doing, where he was serving as a really good off-ball threat, kind of in that Fred role in those minutes before he went out, then you're sitting there with Fred's obviously a knockdown shooter. Gary, OG, you trust those guys. Pascal's been totally fine this season, league average-ish. Precious obviously is firing away. I don't know how much to believe that it's going to stay this way. I'm having a hard time reconciling his 3-point percentage with his 59% free throw percentage. And like the indicator that normally is, like, I'm not sure what to believe there. But then if you got Flynn and you are going to embolden Scottie Barnes to take catch and shoots when they come his way, like maybe there's just enough there to kind of get by if Flynn is part of your rotation that you're not super concerned, and you can kind of always have at least like 2 shooters on the floor, maybe 3. Maybe that's enough. It's this team is weird, man. We're going to continue on, Jamar, and sort of round things out. Look at some back end rotation guys. Is there a role for any of these guys? And we'll kind of finish off this conversation in just one second. But first, want to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar, making the best tasting protein bars in the game. You got to try them out. If you're a person with a sweet tooth like me, who is constantly snacking at late at night, this is a great sort of way to counteract those bad habits, because you don't need to be having candy or chocolate or chips or whatever it might be at midnight. Instead, scratch that itch with a Built Bar. They've got tons of flavors for everybody. You got to check them out. They have, the fruity flavors. They've got more sort of sweet and mint brownie. The sweet confections? That's the word I'm looking for. You've got white chocolate cookies and cream as a limited time flavor right now. Everything in between. They've got nut and nut-free flavors for those who have allergies. They're keto friendly. And the thing about Built Bar is that they're all about the taste. They make it taste great first and then figure out how to make it healthy. And they don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. Their bars, on average, contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. That's like 8 times less sugar than you're finding in a standard candy bar. You got to check them out. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, to get 15% off your order. That is the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And we round out your first listen of the day with Jamar Hinds from Raptors Republic. So playoffs on the way. We've kind of talked about what the shortened rotation could look like. Mentioned a couple of guys from the sort of deeper bench who could slot in here. We should probably talk about Khem Birch a little bit, because we did not have him in that main 4 coming off the bench as sort of the trusted quartet at full health. And look, all of this assumes full health, and assuming full health is a very fickle thing in the NBA. So, take it all the grains of salt that you need. But when it comes to Khem Birch, obviously he's been starting some games. He's been playing better lately. He's been back in favor. Is there a particular reason why you had him outside? I think people who listen to this podcast know that I'm just like not super keen on what Khem Birch has been doing both ends of the floor. I feel like guys do the things that they're asking of him a little bit more effectively than he does. But is there a reason for you why he's outside of that 4 for you? And is there an avenue to him kind of getting back in and being one of those trusted guys, whether it's bumping out a Thad, whether it's adding another big man to their rotation and pumping out Malachi Flynn or something like that, and just rolling with exclusively large people? Where are you at with Khem and sort of his role on this team down the stretch here?
For Khem, for now, I just see him as just an extra big in
right.
Off the bench, where I just think that over the whole season, Precious and Boucher have been more viable options, and they're more versatile, like defensively on the perimeter. Although Boucher has his moments where he has horrible closeouts on the perimeter, and someone just beat you get an open shooter and he just has the worst closeout, and then they have an open driving lane. We've seen that a lot, but his activity on the offensive glass and just his rim protection and stuff like that, I just feel like Precious and Boucher have those spots locked down. Where Khem would come in is if they wanted to go big and slide everybody else down. You slide Precious to the 4, or if it's like a mix and match starting lineup, bench kind of rotation type of thing, where he would be the guy at center and he would bring everybody else down a notch. The thing with Khem is that he's going to kind of muck things up from a spacing perspective.
Yeah.
And we already don't have a lot of shooters, right? So he's a guy that the defense doesn't have to account for, and they'll kind of pack the paint more. So, and he's not going to get minutes over a guy like Precious. So that's why I said he would only be in those big lineups. And I mean, that is a possibility. Nurse is not traditional by any means. So there could be a matchup where, you know what, okay, let's roll with Khem. And
Yeah.
there could be a time where he prefers Khem over somebody that I didn't see. Maybe he likes Khem in a matchup over Precious. Like, say, I'm going back to the Philly example where he wants to have someone guard Embiid for 5 minutes or something. Maybe he likes that matchup better. I don't know, but that he just is in the extra big role to me, and we still want to prioritize, spacing and shooting and stuff like that. Because remember the Cavs games at the start of the road trip where we basically had no spacing whatsoever.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, exactly. And Pascal tried to do what he can, and get into paint, but he kept getting blocked and stuff like that. Like, that's what you don't want. And that's what happens when you don't have a good amount of floor spacers on the court. And if you have Khem on the court too much, that's probably going to happen. And even like you mentioned, like a guy like Utah, he hasn't been a good 3-point shooter this season either, right? So outside of like the guys like Fred and OG and Gary and sometimes Flynn, you don't have a lot of reliable shooting. So that's why I feel like in a healthy rotation, it's kind of hard to find a spot for Khem because he's gonna hurt the spacing when you have other guys that are a little bit more versatile on the offensive end.
Yeah, that's all well put. I think the reason I'm pretty comfortable with Khem being like the 10th man is that he does do some things that in a pinch could be pretty useful. And if you slide him in place of a guy like Precious or Boucher, like I think that could be pretty reliable. I would rather Precious and Boucher's skill set on just a regular day, but some things can happen. Like perhaps you get into a situation where a team has like a particularly good defensive matchup for Pascal Siakam. So maybe you're running your stuff through Fred VanVleet a little bit more. Maybe you're running a little bit more pick and roll and they're doubling or sending extra attention towards Fred in those pick and rolls. I would much rather Khem as the short roll guy in those situations than I would Precious or Boucher, right? Like I think that's a good utility for him. I also think, we saw against Jokic on Saturday, like Precious had some trouble in that matchup. That's kind of the closest corollary you can find to Embiid in the Western Conference, I would say. And Khem had a better time with a guy like Jokic than Precious did. So maybe it does become a situation in a series against the Sixers where Precious does get played out just because he can't hang with Embiid physically. Like he's got like the hops and everything like that to protect the rim, but against a guy like that, like he just doesn't have a strong enough base to not get knocked over every single time by his post up. So maybe that's where Khem comes in with his superhuman strength. I agree though, the fact that he doesn't really shoot, the fact that he hasn't really expanded upon the flashes he showed at the end of last season does kind of limit his overall utility, and it limits his fit with these other guys because like you can stick Boucher in the corner and feel comfortable that he's at least going to fire away, right? Precious is going to take those. Even Thad has shown a little bit more eagerness in the last couple of weeks here to put up those catch and shoots, and you can stick them there. It's not like the greatest spacing. Teams that aren't necessarily caring about those guys all that much, but at least it's a threat of a 3 going up, which Khem doesn't really offer right now. And so as well as Khem has played in the last few games, I still think just with the way the team is kind of fitting together, the way the pieces come together, I would rather him be kind of a break glass in case of emergency type big. But you need guys like that, right? Like no team ever went on a full playoff run without some random guy off the bench really kicking in some help at a really important moment. And I think that could kind of be Khem's, utility on this team is, he could. It's a stretch to say he could swing a series, but maybe he swings a game because he can offer some skill set that other guys can't against a particular matchup that's given the Raptors trouble. Any last parting shots here on the rotation? Anyone that we haven't really dug into yet? Banton, obviously, I feel like he's just so green and weird that it's probably a little risky to put him into really high leverage games right now. And I'm fine with that. Justin Champagne's kicking around as well. Anyone that we haven't touched on yet that you think maybe has a bit of a case to get some run in regular minutes down the stretch and into the postseason?
Delano, we'll see spot minutes from time to time, depending on what matchup that Nurse wants. Like there might be even times where him and Flynn are on the court at the same time. I could see that, but Champagny, that one's a little bit hard to see because he's playing the same position as Scottie and OG. That's a little bit harder to
Yeah.
see. I don't think it'd be any deeper than 10. Like we talked about Khem being the 10th guy.
Yep.
I don't think there'd be a situation where we go 11, 12. Like guys like Utah, Champagny, Banton, it's harder to see. Like if there was going to be an 11th guy, it would be Banton, and then after that, I don't really see it. Nurse is not the guy to go that deep.
Yeah, you're probably right. We might be stretching the bounds of Nick Nurse's trust by going to 11. We'll be out there with a 6-man rotation. Just
Exactly.
we're going the 5 guys, and then sometimes Precious, and then shut up and deal with it. But Jamar, this was great, man. Thank you so much for hanging out and talking about a thing that is going to be a thing I think people are debating and discussing for the rest of the season. What is the proper usage of all of these weird ass players the Raptors have collected on one roster, and how does it all come together? Lots of decisions for Nick Nurse to make. A decision that you do not have to make is going and following Jamar's work, because you do a wonderful job, man. Where can people check out all of your excellent stuff?
You can check me out at Raptors Republic. My Twitter handle is also there, the screen below. But yeah, I do quite a bit of previews and recaps when I can on whichever game. So yeah, that's where the majority of my work is.
Excellent, man. Jamar kicks ass. Go follow Jamar. Jamar doesn't have enough followers. Go follow Jamar. His Twitter handle's right on the screen there. That's going to do it. You can find me at Woodley Sean on Twitter. You can go to all your favorite podcast apps and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. They're all free. You can also go to YouTube, subscribe over there. It's much appreciated. We've got testimonials about the YouTube coming in. This one comes from Chris just during the podcast. I'll read this one out. Just wanted to send some love for the YouTube Locked On channel. Streaming from my TV is extremely convenient, and it's become my new way of consuming the pod. Be like Chris and follow the show on YouTube. It's much appreciated when you go ahead and do that. You get to look at my face every day and my much better looking guests whenever they come on the show. We will wrap it up there. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. Go make Locked On NBA your second listen of the day, as they are giving you the lowdown on all of the games throughout the NBA each and every single night in case you missed them. And with that, we'll leave it there. We'll be back again tomorrow to talk Raptors Clippers. Bye-bye.